Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Peter coming at you through the tubes of the internet. Today, taking a look at the latest release from Direct Hit, an album called Crown of Nothing. I'm excited to discuss and glad you could join.
Fast Facts.
Crown of Nothing, released October 26, 2018 via Fat Records, is the fourth studio LP from Milwaukee, Wisconsin-based punk rockers Direct Hit. The group currently consists of four members: frontman Nick Woods, bassist Steve Murray, guitarist Devin Kay, and drummer Danny Walkowiak.
Backstory.
Direct Hit have dropped 4 albums in the last 10-ish years, but that only tells part of the story, because they've also released a huge volume of EPs and splits to pad out their discography. Their full-length debut Dome Splitter compiled and re-recorded greatest hits from the band's first 5 EPs, but since then Direct Hit have focused exclusively on rock opera concept albums for their main releases. 2013's Brainless God tells a series of stories happening at the onset of a nuclear annihilation event, and the band's current album Crown of Nothing seems to exist in that same universe. Featuring a literal brainless god as the album artwork and examining similar themes of life and death, right and wrong, this latest record acts as at least a spiritual successor to their previous work. So, possible spoilers for the albums in question here. I don't really feel like I was able to follow the story of either of these releases, even after watching the supplemental video material, but I'll be commenting on the main beats and ongoing themes, so just FYI if spoilers are a concern.
Track-by-track analysis.
This release has 14 tracks and clocks in at 44 minutes. The record feels overstuffed at this length. The band pushed things forward with upbeat instrumentals throughout, but often overindulge in the album's popular elements to the point that they get stale. There's ambition on display with the world building here, but several songs feel like they aren't progressing the story much and instead just rehashing established concepts. Neither factor is exactly a deal breaker, but I definitely think trimming this album's runtime down by 10 or 12 minutes could have given it a lot more punch.
Track 1, Different Universe.
Direct Hit kicked this record off with a big and bold opener that follows an almost identical song construction to the first track on Brainless God. A lo-fi intro with a cinematic feel leads into the band dropping their catchphrase and blasting the listener with pop-punk guitars. The instrumental here has a really epic feel. It takes a cool turn into a robotic synth solo and pounding floor toms for the bridge. The band seems to be going for broke right from the jump. Lyrically, Direct Hit sets the stage with a character who's been biting their tongue and hiding their true feelings but can't go through with it anymore. It's mask off time, and this sentiment builds throughout the tune until it's probably best articulated in the very last line. I love that this wording just boldly asserts, "I feel how I feel, I won't be told otherwise," and that punk mentality in a poppy song works well to start the record off on a strong note.
Track 2, Welcome to Heaven.
So welcome to heaven, just a state of dumb contentment.
Here, heaven's presented as boring and monotonous, and the angels that inhabit it are zonked out simpletons. This record spends a lot of time mulling over the afterlife, and the promised land being a state of dumb contentment is a unique take, one that highlights the absurdity of an eternity spent in the same place the whole time. As the tune progresses, we see a character getting increasingly fed up with life in paradise. They have some sort of underlying vendetta that needs carried out, and being confined to heaven just isn't gonna work, so they escape through a trapdoor down to hell. The musical elements that accompany this transition to the underworld absolutely rip. Direct Hit draw out notes of the chorus for a colossal breakdown during the last minute of this cut, driving toms jump on, and it's one of the coolest instrumental elements on this release. A great lead single for the album and probably its strongest song.
Track 3, Pain/Boredom.
Direct Hit blasts out a minute of hardcore intensity on this third tune and presents some super dark subject matter to match the vibe. Lyrics mention a snake writhing in pain, eating itself as onlookers mock and taunt it for deserving this fate. And this seems to tie in the larger themes of the record when it gets to the line, maybe a reference to the dichotomy of heaven and hell, good and evil, or even a meta commentary on the album having super heavy songs juxtaposed against super poppy songs. The band paints a really vivid picture of torment here in just 50 seconds, and it's a well executed tune.
Track 4, Altered States.
All the ghosts in the graveyard, all are just what they want.
This song seems to be about the burdens that come with consciousness. How humans are biologically just animals, but also have to deal with the existential anxiety about the meaning of life and what comes after. This cut calls back to previous tunes by acknowledging that even if you do end up getting the good ending and going to heaven, it's just a vapid slurry of nothingness forever as a prize. Musically, this tune doesn't really have any distinguishing characteristics to my ear. Chugging, muted power chords open up into the sing-songy chorus, and it sounds fine, but it's by the book Direct Hit. The record begins with such lush instrumentation that once the band fall back into familiar patterns, it seems a bit basic. A cool theme here, but one that's been used a couple times already and without much interesting sonically to back it up.
Track 5, Perfect Black.
Here we stand, perfect black. Taking time for what's eclipsed the other side.
The band again delve into hardcore for this tune, where a character gets their first look at the afterlife. There's some really witty turns of phrase about this vast expanse of space they're staring into, observing how on one hand it's so uniformly black they can't tell their position, and on the flip side so blindingly white that it all just blends together. It's another good articulation that the overarching characteristic of eternity is that it's eternal, and the distinction between heaven and hell is secondary and less significant. Singer Nick Woods channels fucked up for the vocal delivery here, belting out lines in throat-shredding bursts to match the explosive instrumentals underneath, and it sounds awesome. The guitar solo 2 minutes into the tune is another highlight. The clean tone jumps out high in the mix and just goes off to the races. Its speed matches the intensity of the vocal, and these elements mix great here.
Track 6, That Answer.
I'm not the one, I'm not the one, I'm not the one you want.
The character featured in this tune seems to be a reluctant savior who doesn't have the answers and just wants to be left alone. I like how the ideal outcome they're hoping for is to crumble into dust and cease to exist, and it tracks with the album's running theme that maintaining consciousness for eternity is inherently horrible. The visual of constantly riding into the sunset, trying to match the sun's pace and not let it slip over the horizon, works great for the pre-chorus, and then the track delves into some super bubbly pop for the refrain. It has an almost goofy, circusy feel and it's way over the top. And so's the blasting horn solo midway through this cut. I gotta give this track a thumbs up for all the weird elements it pulls off, but it definitely goes on too long. If a minute had been clipped off the end of this tune, it could have really been something special. The chorus is just so sugary sweet that once or twice through was plenty, but 5 times seems excessive. The record knows how to cut the hardcore tunes short so they don't overstay their welcome, but it doesn't have the presence of mind to apply that same logic to the overly poppy stuff. Too much of a good thing on this cut, but still very cool.
You can tell everybody that we're nothing, just a collection of all the rise and
Track 7, Life in Hell.
Are we the only ones who know you're nothing but an animal?
This song seems to describe a character stuck in a loop of suffering with no one to hear their pleas. They're locked in a room with tied hands, just biding their time until the end comes. The instrumentation here is laid back by Direct Hit standards, and the mid-tempo approach doesn't seem particularly inspired. The song's theme is being stuck in a rut, and I think unfortunately the storytelling progress across the album kind of fits this too. This release does a great job of setting the groundwork for a narrative, but it's becoming increasingly apparent that a plot's not developing much along with it. Too many tracks on the tail end of this release don't bring enough new content to the table, and this is the first major offender in my opinion.
Track 8, something we won't talk about.
Took you out for a drink at a party. Poison cup, silver tongue was the start. You were gone.
This tune starts with a sample from American Psycho and seems to feature a character similar to Patrick Bateman. After a long period of stalking, the killers lured the victim back to their apartment and is ready to commit the deed. This tune's super dark subject matter is matched with some of the record's bounciest pop instrumentals, which creates a really demented mood. The vocal melodies take a dancey, upbeat tone while they're taunting the victim with the fact that no one can hear them scream and their inevitable doom is coming. A really creepy cut here, but fitting for the tone of the story. Good track.
Track 9, You and I Are Nothing But Lies.
Direct Hit crank a spooky organ sound high in the mix on this track, and it gives a bit of a surfy feel to the instrumental accompanying the cynical lyrics here. The band sing about being fed up, exhausted, and paralyzed before deciding to take action and get revenge on their master. At this point in the story, I'm really finding myself craving some specifics in terms of characters and plot events, and this tune definitely doesn't deliver in that regard. If there are separate characters here, I don't think there's any way to tell them apart based on the text of the record, so it just makes the themes of these songs seem extremely samey. And this is another track that runs through its overly poppy chorus too many times. Thumbs down here, but this track partially shares that burden with all other cuts that repeat their refrain ad nauseum.
Track 10, The Problem.
We're not so different, you know. Just one or two chromosomes slipped backward.
The music here deviates furthest from Direct Hit's usual MO. The delay-heavy drums and synths sound like something Blink would have done on their self-titled album, and it's a cool and distinct change of pace. Lyrics here are nihilistic and delivered via a melancholy vocal with lines like, "We're the worms of the earth, why even bother?" Direct Hit lay the gloom on heavy for 4 minutes with largely the same instrumental throughout. The track takes on a bit of a hypnotic quality, and it's a nice deviation, if maybe a bit monotonous.
We're just a waste of a life. Why bother even trying?
Track 11, Bliss Addiction.
We're nothing better than the dirt into which we dissolve. We're nothing more, nothing less.
One last heavy hitter here, sonically in the vein of Perfect Black or Pain/Boredom, and the harsh tone is used to be aggressively pessimistic. Life's a hoax, we're all jokes, it's just blind, dumb scum for everyone, it's all meaningless. Direct Hit have been stuck in the same theme with the same violent, sadistic content for the last 5 songs, and it's really getting draining.
Everybody at their meeting, I gotta tell you, it's a joke.
Track 12, Losing Faith.
The time has come to get out of here. No faith left, no time to fear our path to death. This endlessness.
As the record moves into its final act here, the story does seem to finally advance a bit, with the character who realizes heaven isn't all it's cracked up to be and decides to take the afterlife into their own hands. Losing faith seems to bring with it the loss of heaven, and so finally there could be an end to that eternal boredom in sight. The tune's chorus mentions taking the easy way out repeatedly, and that phrase is often a euphemism for suicide. The idea of committing suicide to intentionally avoid heaven, maybe even once this character's already in heaven, is interesting, and even though the instrumentals aren't anything too exciting here, I still appreciate that this tune moves into new territory thematically.
Track 13, Disassemble.
Direct Hit add what sounds like a huge horn section on this penultimate cut, and having that bold instrumentation completely filling out the mix between the vocal portions of the track does a lot to inject life into the tail end of this release. Lyrically, the cut takes a similar approach to Alkaline Trio's This Could Be Love, presenting step-by-step directions for how to commit some grisly act. And story-wise, the process outlined here seems to finally dispatch the main antagonists once and for all, with them being reduced to blood, ash, and smoke, and hopefully eliminated for good. This cut is definitely a late album highlight with its big band sound.
Track 14, Heaven's End.
Here a character finally reaches heaven's end, so all's well that ends well, I guess. If you didn't pick up on the fact that life's just a meaningless joke during the 10 or so other previous tracks with that same theme, this last cut taps that topic one last time. There's actually quite a bit of witty lyricism on display during this track. I love the stilted vocal delivery during the verses and the soaring chorus, but everything feels so played out at this point of the record it's hard to really get into it. A solid closer, but I don't think there's any new beats to comment on here that haven't already been thoroughly discussed elsewhere.
Verdict.
Overall, I thought this album was pretty good, but it definitely suffers from pacing issues, both in progressing to new lyrical subject matter and in introducing new instrumental arrangements. I love the record after my first few listens and still think the first 20 minutes or so are solid, but I'm not sure it'll have much staying power due to all the filler. That said, there's hardly anything on this release that I actively dislike. Most songs are fun, and taken in small doses they work just fine. I just don't think the album as a whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that's always extra disappointing when the record in question is a concept album. Therefore, I'm going to give this release a score of 7 out of 10.
So welcome to heaven. Just a state of dumb contentment, peeling back small and here and I am done.
So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the record. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the release, my critique, or the review format in general. Making this is a lot of work, but also fun, and definitely worth it if it helps some people wrap their head around the record. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
It's a series of tubes.